send him a message yesterday about an external mic
Right. I did
and
see that.
speaking more slowly.
Yeah, he was a little unfollowed.
And partly, John thinks maybe if he had an external mic on his computer.
He was speaking into the computer.
I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah, because some of it was mushy.
Yes.
He didn't quite,
Right.
yeah.
And then if he slows down again, that will help also to compensate for
I
that.
just thought he was incapacitated.
Well, that's probably true. He has a very, very busy schedule. And then he's, in addition to writing responsibilities there, I told John, he is moderating debates for candidates in King County. So he's called upon to do a lot of things. And of course, yesterday he sprung around.
Yeah, that was the surprise.
Yeah. But I thought he made a nice segue
Oh, yeah,
into
for
today.
today. I agree.
So if it's not the hometown district, what about I can go. Did you like that?
You know, I listened to excerpts before.
Did they play?
Yeah.
The books.
Good morning.
Just take a couple moments and we'll get started. I already put the adoption in so you can share your screen automatically.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, we can start in just a couple moments.
Okay.
Any questions for me or anything?
No, I think I figured out my sound a little bit better than yesterday. Um, I'm gonna, am I super loud when I talk like this?
No, we can adjust that on our end, but
Got a lot of
Okay.
old people here.
your sound clear, so.
Okay. The cost of this is I had to turn off my air conditioner. So if I start sweating, it's just because of that.
Turn on.
All right, let me get myself set up. And so I do have this is the future of journalism, right? So there's a lot of tech stuff. I've done a run through. I'll tell this to the audience too when we start, but I've done a run through on all my stuff. Oh, great. Well, then I've done a run through of all the stuff that I'm going to use in my presentation. Fingers crossed it's all going to work. But if there is a little delay, just a little bit of patience goes a long way. It'll work. Okay. All right. Let's do. All right. And then I got to do my share screen first. Okay. Screen. Okay. All right. Okay, cool. Sure, sure. Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all here today. I am John Mann, Director of Education for Lakeside, and for today is the final day of our lecture series on journalism and media literacy. And I'd like to welcome back Kurt Prendergast, whose talk this morning is on the future of journalism. Kurt is the co-founder of the Tucson Agenda, a daily newsletter focused on government and politics in Tucson. I do always ask you please mute your cell phone ringers. And then also, as you come in and out of Orchestra Hall on the table, I always do have feedback forms. And they are very helpful to me when it comes to future topics. But with that said, I'd like to welcome Kurt Prendergast.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I spoke yesterday morning about what happened at the hometown newspaper, and that kind of sets us up for this conversation. And I'm going to kind of touch on what I talked about yesterday before moving into the new stuff. But yeah, like John said, I'm the co-founder of the Tucson Agenda, and this is kind of very much in line with the future of journalism. This is a Substack newsletter. So what that is we write our original reporting, we curate local news, and we send an email to our subscribers at 6 o'clock in the morning, Monday through Friday. We're hyper local. We only talk about stuff that is happening or affecting Tucson and Southern Arizona. And speaking of Tucson and Arizona, it is the summertime and it is really hot. And in order to have the sound work better, I have turned off my air conditioner. So if my forehead starts shining with sweat, it's just because it's hot out here. But I really look forward to talking to you all about this. I've been in the journalism world for like 13, 14 years. I've reported at the whole time in local journalism. I reported on for the Nogales International, which is a small twice weekly newspaper on the Arizona-Mexico border. I was there for several years. And then I moved up to Tucson, which is about an hour north of the border. And I worked for the Arizona Daily Star, which is a metro daily that serves a population of 1.1 million. I covered pretty much everything. I spent a lot of my time covering the border, federal courts, transportation, local government, anything and everything. And then last year, a colleague of mine, we started the Tucson Agenda. I was laid off. I was the opinion editor at the time at the Arizona Daily Star, and I was laid off. And my colleague kind of saw the writing on the wall and decided to jump ship as well. We launched this. It's going strong. We're on July 4th is our 1-year anniversary, and it's when we're talking about the future of journalism. I kind of feel like what we're doing right now is the future of journalism. So what I want to get into here is we are in a moment. I want to use an example here. There was a presidential debate last night, which I was on deadline and I didn't see. And I'm going to watch it after this. But here is, when we talk about the future of journalism, this is the lead story in the New York Times about that debate. And it's 5, 6, 7 paragraphs about Biden apparently looked feeble last night. That's the most noteworthy thing that the New York Times took from that debate. And then, 6, 7, 8 paragraphs down, they say that Donald Trump spewed a litany of falsehoods, or whatever their phrase was. So that is kind of the state of the national stage when we talk about the future of journalism. I don't know exactly what to do about that. What I'm more concerned with is this. And this is a map that I showed yesterday in our talk. This is from the Medill School of Journalism at the Northwestern University. And this is the kind of the state of local news. That's where I pay my attention. If you look at this map, the yellow areas are where there is no local news coverage. The gray is where there is one outlet. In the vast majority of cases, it's a weekly that's not really covering local news. Like I think a lot of you expect local news to be covered, covering city council, covering school boards, zoning, local crime, like all that type of stuff. And then the purple is where there are 2 or more outlets. And if we use that example of the Biden debate coverage, that is going to be the coverage that most of these people, look at all the gray areas there, the yellow areas, that's where they're going to get their news. And that's going to be it. There's going to be no other news about what's going on locally. There's nothing. And so that's where I focus my efforts. But what I want to do is, this is the hole that we're in, right? This is where we are now. Local newspapers are collapsing. There are 10 newspapers close every month. 2,900 have closed since 2005. It is just a kind of a slow-moving disaster. And the ones that remain, kind of call them ghost papers, where they are kind of newspapers in name only. You might have that brand, that masthead that you recognize that's been around for a century, but kind of in its guts. There's not a lot of reporters, there's not a lot of editors. It's not doing the job that you think that it should be doing. And then we have the term news deserts, which are those yellow areas or those gray areas on that map where people just don't have access to local news. There's just nothing there. But when we get into the future of journalism, I think what a lot of people, their attention turns to is this bottom thing here, the algorithms, the deep fakes, the artificial intelligence. That's what's coming up, and that's what's kind of already here. So that's where I'm going to spend a little bit of time today. I want you to kind of have somewhat of a working knowledge of just what this is that's coming at you. So let me move on to this. So this is the tech part, right? So this is, just give it a second, it should load up. If it doesn't, I have a backup. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Carrie Lake. She is a former news broadcaster in Arizona who ran for governor in 2022, and she lost. And since then, and even before, she did like the kind of Trumpian line of like, this is all rigged, the election, it was stolen, yada, yada, yada. She kept it up for like 2 years. And filed all the lawsuits, lost all the lawsuits. Clearly, she does not know what she's talking about. She's a very aggravating person because she doesn't really seem to care whether what she's saying is true or not. And so a colleague of mine at the Arizona Agenda, which is a sister newsletter of ours, he did something really clever. He could see the writing on the wall that deepfakes, that are coming. Deepfakes are videos that look real but are not. So what he did is he made this Carrie Lake testimonial in support of the Arizona Agenda. Carrie Lake does not support the Arizona Agenda. But I want to play this video for you to show you, like, this is what's coming. This is what's already here when it comes to in the news world. This is happening.
Hi, I'm Carrie Lake. Subscribe to the Arizona Agenda for hard-hitting, real news and a preview of the terrifying artificial intelligence coming your way in the next election. Like this video, which is an AI deepfake the Arizona Agenda made to show you just how good this technology is getting. Did you realize this video is fake? Well, in the next 6 months, this technology will get a lot better. By the time the November election rolls around, you'll hardly be able to tell the difference between reality and artificial intelligence. But don't worry, the Arizona Agenda is going to help you navigate this brave new world of AI technology trying to sway your vote. The Arizona Agenda will arm you with the knowledge you need to spot political AI deep fakes like this, so you don't get fooled again. So read on.
Okay, right? So that one immediately drew a cease and desist letter from Carrie Lake's lawyers. Right? I don't know exactly what happened to that, but this is the type of thing that you're up against, right? And this is where like they're kind of moving in this direction. And obviously, like Carrie Lake is never going to. This is the exact opposite of what she would ever say, right? She's a huge fake news person, right? Just blah blah blah, like everything is fake. And so you're going to see this, and this video is obviously it's designed. It's a tool for you to understand that it is fake, for you to be able to spot that it's fake. But these types of videos are going to explode across social media, and a lot of people are going to scroll through it, and like somebody can make a video saying, I don't know. I think there actually was an example recently. I think in Maine and New England with Biden, a deepfake audio. But this is what's coming. And so you're going to have another layer of discernment as you try to navigate the news landscape. So I'm going to play this next video for you because this is going to kind of help you spot stuff. Because as you scroll through your Facebook, it's easy to see a headline that says something that's not true, and then it looks like there's a video of this person saying it, and you might be like, oh, well, they said it. Oh, okay, great. But watch this.
Now that you know this is a deep fake, you're probably catching a bunch of little inconsistencies that you can't quite put your finger on. This is a less refined version of me to help. My voice is pretty good, right? But my lips don't quite sync up. My cadence isn't natural. My skin is a little too smooth. And around the boundaries of my face, you almost see the little glitches in the matrix. And in different settings, like when I'm in motion, some of those telltale signs of deepfake videos can be even easier to spot. But remember, the Arizona Agenda made me deepfake Carrie Lake on a budget of $0. They just asked one talented software engineer to spare a few hours. With a little money and some time, all of these inconsistencies can be smoothed out well enough that it will trick even a trained viewer. To truly defend yourself against the kind of deepfake reality that's coming, you'll need to rely on more than your eyes and ears.
Sorry. So yeah, so these are the things, like, and I'm sure if you go online, if you are curious about this, there's gonna be a lot of videos that can help you understand like what's real and what isn't. But those are the key things that like the mouth doesn't match. There's a little bit of, like off like that, like a poorly dubbed video. And so this is where I feel bad for everybody, because this is another layer of responsibility that the average news consumer now has on their plate. And it's horrible, it's not fair. But I would expect to see a lot of the national news outlets are going to start, when things pop up that are deep fakes, are going to start doing like the debunking, they're going to start doing training videos for people, for the general public to understand how to tell what's real and what's not. But this is, this is coming, this is here. And as he points out the video, this was done on a budget of $0. And it was several months ago. This technology is advancing quickly. And if someone is willing to put a whole bunch of money into this, then they can create really vivid, that look real videos, and they can make thousands of them and pump them out. So this is, if I could say anything to you today, it is that you have to pause when you see things in your social media feeds. You have to pause and be like, is that real? And I know that it's a headache, and I'm sorry that this is the way it is, but this is This is what we got to deal with. And so that's the really like pernicious stuff that's coming. But there's another layer of the news ecosystem that's emerging, that has emerged already, that I'm not sure if and many of you are aware of, and that's TikTok. And when I talk to our like young reporters and the students, this is where they're getting their news. This is the primary channel for news to get to the younger generation. Some of them, obviously still read newspapers and, things like that and try to go to legitimate news sources and all that. But they're kind of like hooked into TikTok all day long. And their TikTok is videos of, everything. Cat videos. There's this funny thing that happened on the street, whatever. But I want to show you, like, this is the type of news. This is how young people want the news. Okay. So I'll give this a second to load as well. But yeah, I can't say enough how much every conversation I have with somebody in their 20s includes this. And they ask us if we're on TikTok, and we try, but I'm 42. I'm already a million years old in terms of this technology. But this is what it looks
the
like.
mall and asking students how they feel about the financial crisis and what they think should be.
And a little background on this, we're in Tucson, which is home to the University of Arizona. It's going through a financial crisis right now. There's a huge screw up at the highest levels in terms of budgeting. And they were short, it varies from like 170 million down to, about 100 million, but they're in financial trouble. So we had one of our young reporters go out and talk to students to hear what they had to say about it.
Should be done about it. $170 million in debt. Oh my God.
Deeply irresponsible. It just sucks because I feel like so many people in many universities, not just the U of A, but get overpaid. And I think that it is, I think it's really irresponsible and really disrespectful to those people that actually keep the university running, to know that their job isn't necessarily secure, but those who get paid like $1 million annually, their job is secure.
These people are just like the people that are getting cut, and like all of the people that it's affecting are just like victims of irresponsibility, honestly, because how do you lose that much money in the first place? Also, to not be even clear on where it went, and then to have all of your students, staff, your entire college campus, your entire university, your entire brand suffer because of that.
Totally. I can't even wrap my mind around that amount of money, or where that could be going, or why it's even, happening in the first place, and how better managed it could be under any other power.
And yeah, I just think that it's deeply irresponsible and a good symbol of needing good leadership.
Okay, so a couple things I want to point out to you here is, so you see how this is vertical, right? It's not wide. It's because this is designed for a phone. This is designed for a person scrolling through their phone. Very casual absorption of news. They're just scrolling. So it's kind of when they're waiting in line to get a coffee or whatever, this is how they're consuming news, little bits like this. And you notice how there's not a lot of, the person who is doing this video is a journalism student. So they're trained in the, ethics and practice of journalism. So they do a little bit of intro, to like set up the video for the person. Them standing there with the microphone, holding it in front of someone's face, this what we call a man on the street interview, just grabbing somebody and being like, hey, you want to talk about this thing that's, in public interest. That's a classical move, right? That's what you see on TV news stations do that. So that's standard. What people are saying, you can tell that like they have that culture in them of like, oh, okay, so I've agreed to talk about this thing of the public interest. And I think it's irresponsible. I think it's this, that, and the other, but that's very standard fare for news. You would see that. We've been seeing that for 40 years. But what I want to point you to is the cuts. So it moves quickly from person to person to person to person. And that's because TikTok is about speed. That video that you just saw was a pretty long video for TikTok. Usually it's, 20, 30 seconds. And so it's fast moving. It's right into your eyeballs. and it's for people who don't have any time, who are casually paying attention. So that video, like what's up next here, is some ridiculous video of some airline. You know what I mean? Like that's what's on either side of this. So it just pops up in a feed, which I'm sure is similar to when you have your Facebook account. It's just like that. But it's all about speed, fast, 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 and it's all about color. It's all about like reaching into your brain and hitting your brainstem as quickly as possible. But here's another. I'm going to do another TikTok video because I want to show you how like it can actually be used to accomplish even other journalistic goals. So the setup to this is one of our interns. Here we go, and she is going to talk about a tool that we made to help guide voters. But this is a format that you're going to see all the time on TikTok. This is what young people this is how they absorb news even more than the video that you just saw. That was more classical TV news. This is how they get the news.
It's dedicated to the upcoming Tucson election. We decided to make a wiki account so the community can collaborate together and spread hopeful information about the upcoming election. Our main goal is to help the community follow along through the election through steady news coverage and provide you with a voter's guide to help make the decision process much easier. On our wiki page, you'll be able to find information on voter statistics, campaign finance reports, and tools to background candidates and much more. This user-friendly tool will be helpful for when those ballots arrive. Make sure to check it out in the link below. And don't forget to place your ballots, because every vote counts. Tucson Agenda's co-founder, Kurt.
So it's that format right there. It is an individual with a microphone talking directly into the camera. And I'll get into this a little bit more later on, but this is where what young people want is they want to hear a direct message from someone they trust. And that someone they trust, this is getting into what's called influencers, that someone they trust to talk about elections is not necessarily Walter Cronkite. It is somebody who maybe like recommends good health products or is an athlete. It's somebody that young people kind of hold up and respect, kind of regardless of their expertise in the specific thing that they're talking about. As you might imagine, this really worries me. You do need to be trained in the ethics and practice of journalism to deliver this information as it needs to be delivered. At the same time, I could sit here and moan about how no one is, reading our stuff or watching our videos or whatever, while a million people are paying attention to what this athlete says or this model says or whatever. That's just the channel that's where the news is flowing right now. For young people, it comes through these influencers, these people that they trust. But in this example here, she was talking about this wiki page that we put together. So this is kind of like, this has potential, right? So they're on TikTok, they have someone they trust, and that was a very highly viewed video, by the way. That was like a couple thousand people watched that video. And so the people who trust that intern, that reporter, she is telling them to go to here, right? This is a wiki that we made, which is just a website you can bounce around easily and allows for multiple people to edit. And so this is something that we put together for our local elections. We have a ton of them. Pima County, we have our county offices, supervisor, sheriff, county attorney, constables. We have a lot of towns with their town councils. It is a long list, and it is very, very difficult to keep track of who's running, who's putting money into these campaigns. How do I find out who I am going to even be voting for, like for your legislative candidates? It's complicated. And so we're trying to give people like the tools they need to track all that. So in here, we have all kinds of, we have stories about elections. We have our curated news coverage, which I call backstories, that you can read about, like, why would you care about voting for the town council? Well, it's because they're the ones who decide how to spend all your tax dollars. They're the ones who decide whether that electric substation is going to go in your neighborhood or not. They're the ones who decide whether they're going to approve a rezoning to build, 200 apartments, on the next block. That's why it matters. That's why it matters who these people are. So people can go into here so that they watch the TikTok video. It's directed them to this page. And then within this page, it directs you to things like this, which is a story about the local county attorney race. So when we talk about the future of journalism at the local level, this is one avenue that future I think is going to take, is using the tools that young people are using, TikTok, so that to reach them, have somebody that they trust talking to them. That person directs them to a verified news outlet, news source, and then that they can read it there. The challenge for us is once they get here, we don't want to bore them to death. It's got to be, gripping, at least in some way, while also maintaining that it's accurate, it's fair, it's impartial, all of those things that we have to do. So, in this brave new world, we're working on it, all right? There are all kinds of people all across the country, which I'm going to get to in a second, who are trying to come up with solutions. And the main problem is that local news is dying. It's collapsing. And so there's this void at the local level where all these people, there's millions of people in the country, millions upon millions upon millions of people in the country who do not hear anything from their local government, local news. There's no outlet to cover it. So that's a void. And so if you don't have local news and you are interested in knowing what's going on in the world, you go to national news. National news, it covers the country as a whole, and a lot of national news outlets do a wonderful job. It's a huge, huge task to take on. But it's as we all are aware, when you get into the national conversation, it's very polarized. It's very us versus them. We have the Biden-Trump camps right now. That's the conversation of the moment. And so you kind of sort yourself into, one camp or the other. And that's how the conversation rolls. But there are small outlets coming up as newspapers collapse. Like, I'm very encouraged by this. Our experience at the Tucson Agenda has been phenomenal. And there are plenty of other local outlets that are springing up all across the country. And a lot of these local outlets, such as ours, they depend on the readers stepping up. Ours is, we make the vast, vast majority of our money comes from paid subscriptions. So it comes from people deciding that I value local news, and I trust that these people are going to do the job that I want them to do, to provide that news, and they pay for it. And as a result of that, I'm able to pay my bills. We have very small overhead, but we can do this. We're kind of on par with the other news outlets in town. Like, we produce daily journalism, and it's creative, it's original, and it's I think what our readers want. Another thing is philanthropists, and this is going to have a huge impact. All across the country, foundations, they're waking up to the fact that there is a huge problem here. There's news deserts coming across all over the country. And there's like a big group got together and they pledged $500 million for local news across the country. And over the course of the years, you're going to see that start juicing up local news outlets. And you're going to see all these places that don't have any news are going to start having like a reporter or two, or another news outlet is going to be able to hire another reporter to cover this an underserved area or underserved community. And so I'm very encouraged by that as well. And then also, while we talk about deep fakes and TikTok, these things that are just kind of wild happening, those are tech things. Tech also, is always a double-edged sword. Tech also allows for local news outlets to spring up at very low cost. Like, we are on Substack, and that's a newsletter platform. And, we have to pay a cut of our revenue to them, but it's ready-made. It's just, you can, in the course of 1 hour, you can go from not publishing to publishing. And what it does is it allows reporters who are laid off or young reporters trying to get into the game, they now have avenues to do that. And so I'm very encouraged by that as well. So I want to point you to a couple local news outlets that I think are doing a really great job and are interesting models. This one here is Public Source. This is in Pittsburgh. and they just do a phenomenal job. They cover local news. You see here they have about school boards, about zonings. They have the controller for Allegheny County. They're just right there. They're doing that type of news that you want your local news outlet to do. You might not be able to articulate it, but this is what you understand over the course of decades of reading local newspapers that you want to happen. They're covering all these things that are going to affect your life, your neighborhood, your city. If you want to know why your city has, on the river there or on the lake, there's whatever development. These are the kinds of outlets that you're going to be able to go back and look and be like, oh, it's because a developer wanted to expand into this area, but no one had done it before because it wasn't zoned for that. So that developer lobbied the city council or the county commissioners or supervisors, whatever your scenario is, to change the zoning laws to allow that development. All right, so boom. So why would they let that happen? What was the reasoning? So they had to go through a zoning examiner, had to go and then go on to the people do the final approval. So you'll be able to see that. And as you see it, you'll be able to see individuals who made decisions, officials who made decisions that allowed that to happen. And maybe it's no big deal. Maybe it's great that the development is happening. I don't know. But you'll be able to know who made those decisions and why. And that is key to understanding why your city is the way it is and what is coming, what's going to happen. And so they're doing that job. And they're a nonprofit. They have foundations supporting them. And they have veteran reporters. These are not amateurs. There are people who have worked for years and years and years in newspapers and news outlets. They're completely focused on the local, just like we are to do on agenda. And they have credibility. They've put in the work and they've done a good job, and the public trusts them. They trust what they say. So they're able to work. They're able to write stories about zoning or the county controller. And people are going to be like, okay, that is an accurate account of what happened. And that's super powerful. And this one is very interesting to me. And honestly, I found out about this this week while doing research for these presentations, and I was blown away. This is fantastic. So for example, what I do a lot is I watch city council meetings and the board of supervisors meetings, the town council meetings, things like that. And I write briefs about them. Because honestly, I find that there is a lot of local news that I absolutely want to know a little bit about, but I really don't want to know 2,000 words about. I don't want to read a super long story about a zoning examiner meeting, for example. But I do want to read a couple sentences about that. I do want to know like what they're talking about and why, and there's a little background. That's great. So I love news. I love reading news briefs. I love writing news briefs. It's an art form. I try to teach that to our interns. This is the heart of a story that I think is insanely valuable. And I want to add this as well. I'm sorry to go on a little tangent, but in Thanksgiving time and Christmas time, I will go back a century earlier and write up like what was going on, in Tucson in 1922 or 1923, and it's just a fun little thing to do. But when I go back, what I find is the local newspapers are filled with these little briefs, and they're delightful. It's like 75, 100 words about anything and everything, about like the lawn contest that the local Rotary Club is doing, about the city council deciding to like actually pave a road, for the first time, about Marie Curie not having enough money and the French government getting together and decided to give her a stipend. Anything and everything, but you can just quickly move through all of these topics and you just get the flavor of what's going on. And the next day or a week later, there'll be another update on that thing. And I absolutely love that. So long story short, this right here is something that's happening in Cleveland. And I don't know if anyone is aware of this, but these documentaries, what Signal Cleveland has done is they have gotten in touch with people in the community who are interested in local government. They've trained them how to take notes in a public meeting, and they pay them. And those people put together briefs about local meetings. And I was reading one this morning that was about the Cleveland Parks Department. They have public bathrooms, and they have a system in the public bathrooms so they don't smell. But that depends somehow on light shining in to kind of do the chemical reaction so that the air moves. But some of these public bathrooms are in the shade. And so the system doesn't go into work. So they smell really bad. So what they did is they created this thing, they call them bubblers, that helps move the air through so that these public bathrooms in the parks don't smell really bad. And the documenters wrote that up, and it's a nice, clear summation of what the people said at the meeting when they decided it, and the clear statement of what the problem was. And that's it, and that's wonderful. And this is something that, like, I think that is you're going to see more and more of. Because there are a lot of people in communities who absolutely want to know what's going on in the community. And they could do this. They would like to give an impartial, factual account of what's going on. They want to participate. In fact, I bet a lot of you, if you are like maybe members of like churches or like food banks, or if you're in health organizations, things like that, you might have somebody in that organization who's taken it upon themselves to put together a newsletter where they kind of gather like what's going on in the community and they send it out to all the people in that group. So there are individuals out there who are trying to do this type of work, but I think culturally, it's a leap to go from I'm writing this for like my group versus I'm writing this for like the news, for the general public. This group right here has bridged that gap, and so they have the people who want to do this, and they've trained them so that this actually is what is useful to the general public. And now that all this information is being pumped out there. And as much as I talk about how much I love covering, public meetings and writing briefs, it's also like it's grunt work. It takes time. And if you have people who are trained to do it, like this could solve a really big problem, like nationwide, if this were adopted and it really worked. And so this is something that makes me really hopeful. Like I think this is fantastic. Oh, and the Tucson Agenda. Probably the best news outlet in the entire country, I'd say. So this is us. This is me. This is me and my colleague, or my colleague and I, Caitlin Schmidt. We started this a year ago, and as you can see, this our birthday bash is coming up. And as I've kind of touched on, this is a Substack newsletter, and this is something that you can just launch for free. And when you start making money, they take their cut. But we own it. There's no corporate overlords, as we call them in the industry. It's just us. We make the decisions. We're going to start advertising soon, and we'll be able to decide what that looks like. We don't have to do like a template that the company that owns our company that owns our company that owns our company has decided that's how your web presence is supposed to look. We get to do this more or less. Substack only has a few options for how it looks, but it's pretty flexible, and we can make a nice, clean presentation. It's completely uncluttered, which I think is key, which I'm going to kind of get to in a minute here. But the experience of reading the news, I think, is something that is talked about a lot in the news industry. But this is my opinion, right? I don't think people fully grasp how atrocious the experience is of reading news. It's something that bothers me every single day. I can't stand pop-up videos. I hate how much when I'm reading online for a news outlet, and there is like a whole bunch of ads, and the text is kind of just like a couple of paragraphs are kind of hidden among a whole bunch of junk. I can't stand it, and I honestly do not understand like the business thinking there of why would you present your product to the public in such a horrible way. I feel like it's very disrespectful to the reader, but because everybody does it, or most outlets do it, we kind of maybe take that as like, oh, that's just how it's done. But I think that's a fatal error for business-wise for the news outlets. So ours is just clean. Everything that in our newsletter is there because we decided that was a good thing for you to see. All has news value. And so you're not wasting time filtering through stuff. We try to write quickly, make it a quick read. We're trying to be very clear, conversational, and readers seem to like it. So and so we're journalist owned, subscriber supported. This thing exists because there are people in Tucson who saw a need for more local news, and they decided that it was worth their money to support this. And so that is the bond that we have with our readers, is that we wake up every day and we work hard, and we don't spend any time on things that aren't related to, like, the mission of this news outlet, to cover local governments, politics, nonprofits, the things that affect your life in Tucson. So that's what we do. That's what we have to do. And so it feeds into this kind of direct relationship that we have with our readers. So since we're small, we have about 4,000 subscribers. We do have people emailing us all the time, and so we try to get back to those emails as much as we can. We do reader surveys. We constantly are talking directly to our readers in our email and our headers, and it's just trying to have a dialogue with our readers, directly with them. So when we're talking about the future of journalism, right, here are some of the challenges that I see. The key one is media literacy. This is one of those things that hopefully you all have heard this term a lot, right? Because this is a key skill for being a citizen of the United States of America in the 21st century. It's tough, but it's tough. Is media literacy. It's knowing how to understand what you're seeing. A great example is that deepfake video. That is another way that everybody has to get more literate. Is they have to be able to identify what is real and what isn't. You also have, chains create these templates for news outlets, for local newspapers, that all look kind of similar. You can kind of just see, you see it and you recognize, like, oh, this is a news website. Now we have tons and tons and tons and tons of organizations or groups that have created websites that look like legitimate news outlets, but are not. That is going to be another thing you're going to have to deal with. If you don't recognize the name of this outlet, if you go to their about page and it's not clear what their mission is, you're going to have to be skeptical. And you're going to see these things that are going to pop up. Social media is where, that's where information flows in our society. And so these little outlets can pop up, and they can have a headline, they can have a photo, blah, blah, blah. It looks like a news story, but it's going to be completely bogus, right? And it's going to be partisan. It's going to be people who have an agenda for whatever issue. It's going to be just, this is just what you got to do. You got to learn how to decipher what's real and what isn't. And the main way to do that is you need to start recognizing what outlets you trust and which ones you don't, and go to those outlets that you trust. And so this is where you inevitably, you need tools. Right? If you all are living your lives, and so now all of a sudden you have to become an expert in figuring out what's real and what's not in this chaotic world that's unfolding in front of you. So you need tools. And so one of the things that we try to do with the Tucson Agenda, and a lot of these other local outlets do, is kind of arm the public with tools. And so that can be little kits on how to tell that video, how to tell a deep fake from a real video. There's also how to get into who's actually on the ballot, for example. That's something that news outlets cover, but honestly, I think that if you went to a lot of local news outlets, our primaries are July 30th, ballots go out July 3rd. Whatever the situation is in the town that you live in, there's going to be local outlets who actually don't really even tell you who's on the ballot. And if they do, that it's really superficial coverage. And so you need tools to figure out even just what is their campaign website? Rather than all this time that you'd have to spend trying to dig up who is on the ballot, what is their name? What are they all about? What is their deal? Let alone what have they done in the past? What's their background? All that. Local news outlets have to gather that and give it to you, as they've done for decades and decades, but it's becoming more difficult because we have fewer newspapers and they're more kind of ghost newspapers. Is the problem. And so there's all sorts of tools like that. And when we talk about this technology stuff that's coming around the bend, pay attention to Pew, Neiman, outlets or organizations that are keeping track of this type of stuff and are trying to train the public to discern what's real and what isn't. We had the example over the last several years of fact checking. That was a tactic that was used, that really came to prominence during the Trump administration. Trying to figure out, like, trying to give the public a tool of, like, okay, so you're hearing this thing, and it's crazy, but it's not so crazy that you immediately are like, oh, that's just not real. It's got that grain of truth in it. And so you had outlets like the Washington Post. They really went at that, doing fact checks of information out in the public, and that's kind of effective, but also it's got its limitations. Part of that is, people want to believe certain things, right? The confirmation bias and all that. And so either you wouldn't believe a fact check from an outlet like the Washington Post, or you already are like, oh, I know that's not real. And so they have a fact check that just kind of confirms that that it's not real. That's valuable. But all of these tools, just like they come up, they have their usefulness, and then they kind of fade away. I would expect that over the next couple of years, the idea of like that fact check is probably going to fade a little bit more. It just doesn't really do the job. But I'm very grateful for all the journalists who've done those, continue to do those. So as technology comes along, new things come along, you're going to have tools rise up to meet that challenge, and then it goes away. And then the next thing comes along, the next thing comes along. But even as I'm telling you, get to public trust, is I'm telling you that you need to go to names that you recognize. So how do you tell, right? These outlets, our outlet can only survive if the public trusts that what we're telling them is the truth. And so you have like Signal Cleveland, is that a legitimate outlet? You kind of have to give them a shot. You got to read it. If what they say turns out to be true, you trust them a little more. If they make a mistake and they own up to it and say, oh my God, we are mortified that we made that mistake. Here's the correct knowledge, that won't happen again. That builds public trust, right? I trust someone who says, oh, I screwed up. If it's an honest mistake, I have no problem with that, unless it happens all the time. But yeah, make your mistake, own up to it, and move on. That's life. And so look for these key things. Look for the about page. Look for them to explain what they're doing, why they're doing it, their professional experience. If they're not saying that, then that's a problem. That's a red flag. So there are key things out there that you should pay attention to. If you are going to be on social media, just kind of scrolling, I would advise having 50 layers of discernment as you scroll through Facebook. There's, as has been the case since Facebook began, particularly again, during the Trump administration, everyone was just going wild about all the misinformation flowing through Facebook. I don't think that that's actually really been resolved. It's not as big of a topic as it used to be. But again, it's do not believe everything that you read. Always be skeptical when you're on social media. There are really well-funded organizations out there who are actively trying to bend your opinion about a wide array of things. There also are just kind of chaotic actors out there who like to stir up dirt and just kind of create problems, the trolls, right? And they're always out there. So you need to if you have people on Facebook whose opinion you trust, who post a lot, and who you think are committed to only posting things that are real and true, pay attention to them. But you just have to be skeptical of everything that you see. And so another challenge for the small local media who are springing up to fill that void left by the collapse of the newspaper industry is funding. And so I gave the examples. We have foundation support, public source. We have if the Tucson Agenda is subscriber supported. That's just local people deciding, yes, I'm willing to pay to have more local news. I want that, so I'll pay for it. That's the whole model. And then you have these foundations and philanthropies are really getting serious about funding local news. And we benefited from that. You know, the Community Foundation of Southern Arizona, they really got serious about this, and they got some money together, and we were able to hire a part-time reporter for us. And several other news outlets, local news outlets, were able to, you know, amplify their process in some way because of that money. And that's great. And so if you are, if you are out there, if you are like, I donate X amount of dollars to foundations every year, and if local news is something that interests you, then you consider putting some of that money to the foundations that fund local news. This last one here, this reaching rural audiences, I haven't really got into that much, but I would say that this is probably like one of the top problems in the news ecosystem right now, and one of the biggest challenges. Because when I talk about these local outlets springing up, a lot of them are in metro areas, right? So they're where there are a lot of people. There are government bodies that make decisions that affect a lot of people. This is the natural flow of journalism as you go to that. But over the years, the rural audiences have been completely neglected. This is very tragic, and I think that if you were to look at where we are politically on the national stage, I think a lot of it is due to the fact that there are tens of millions of people living in rural areas who do not have anyone talking to them, for them, telling their stories, making them part of the story of the country. They just don't have, there's just no news outlets out there. I mean, I grew up in Indiana, right? I grew up in Fort Wayne. I'm actually a Buckeye. I was born in the Columbus area. But there's like, I know like outside of Fort Wayne, like, you know, there's lots of rural areas, and those people are not part of the conversation, right? And so can you only imagine, you know, like out in West Texas, where there's just like, there's not a lot of people, lots of areas of Arizona, there's not a lot of people, and they don't have a lot of news coverage. No one's telling their stories. No one's reporting for them. And taking one example is down at the border, like in Texas. There are huge areas of the border that have either like one news outlet or no news outlet. And the border is going to be one of those issues that is going to play a pivotal role in the presidential election. There are people in Congress across the country who run on the border, in Missouri, Ohio, I'm sure, just all over the country, who, you know, have their narrative of what the border is, which is often just very, 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 very misinformed. And they run on it and they win. They, you know, play on people's fears of the border, but without news outlets on the border, the only way that the stories of what actually happens at the border get to the national audience are when the New York Times or CNN or somebody comes down. You know, Fox News is always down in the Texas border, but the people don't have the tools to tell their own stories. So people in Ohio or Missouri or wherever can say whatever they want about the border, and it will be believed. And there's no real counter story to that, because the main tool that our society has to get those counter stories up into the conversation is the news. And if you don't have the news outlet, it's broken. So rural audiences, that is the challenge. And we are trying to like get more into the rural areas around Tucson as much as we possibly can. We don't have enough people to really do it effectively. But I don't know if that resonates with any of you, and you live in small towns where you would just have no idea what is going on at your local level, or you feel like you're being talked about much more than you're being heard from. This is a key problem that we have to deal with. But yeah, so the opportunities here, right? So we have all these challenges, but I'm very encouraged. We can do it. We can do this. One of the things that I think that we really need to work on is the clear writing. I kind of mentioned that earlier. In the news business, we point to the internet scrambles the news business. Corporations own local newspapers, and so we don't have local control, and all of that stuff, and that's all very legitimate things. But I think that one of the ways that local journalism can succeed, one of the ways that local outlets can be successful, is writing, is to be clear, to understand what you're writing about. to write it as clearly as you possibly can, to take all of the work that needs to get done for a person to understand what their local government is doing, shoulder that. The reporter is responsible for that. Write clear, crystal clear as much as possible. Learn every single day how to be clearer, always. And that's something that we try to do, and it's super difficult, right? One of the reasons that the writing that I see in journalism at all levels is just kind of like atrocious is because it's really, really hard. People are writing on deadline. You don't have a lot of time to sit back and polish. That's just not how it works in a lot of ways. But that has to be it. I think that a lot of readers get turned off because they go to read the news. They might be like, so what is the city council doing? And then they go and try to read it, and it's just this completely muddled story, or it is a story that has this, like, the lead is this long and it's about some anecdotal thing that could be beautiful in its own way, but it's also like, I don't really want to know this, and now I've spent 5 minutes reading this story, and I am kind of like, are you ever going to get to the point, right? So that is, get to the point, like, respect the reader, pity the reader, and so that is one of the things that I think is a very big opportunity for us, where I think local news outlets can fill the void if we can write clearly. Giving tools to people. I think that the public is getting kind of tired of being talked down to. Giving tools to give you the information that you can use to understand what's going on. A great example of this is when reporters are writing about like a lawsuit or a report or something like that, some document, put a link to that document in your story. So I'm interested. I'm like, oh, there's this little, you've written this much about this report. It looks like it's really big and complicated and important, and it's something that I'm really interested in. I can click on it, and A, I can learn all the other stuff that a reporter doesn't have space to put into a story, and B, that will keep the reporting honest. If the public has access to what the reporter is writing about, then the reporter can't get away with kind of fudging or omitting, that type of thing. It's going to be a very honest account. And I think that's what the public wants. It's no longer like a newspaper that is your only avenue to information. Information is everywhere. You have access to more information than a human being has ever had in the history of humanity. Opportunities to also reader buy-in. You all find the sources that you like. You support them financially. You have contact with the reporters and the editors and the publishers. You are now part of it. You've decided this is my outlet, right? That's what it is. It's yours. Like you pay for it. You pay the salaries of these people. This is not some again, like the century-old newspaper that gets money from the furniture companies and the car dealers and all that stuff. And if you subscribe and you say, you know what, I didn't like what you did today, I'm going to unsubscribe. And they're like, well, we're sorry to lose your business, but okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. Reader buy-in, where you're like, I am part of a community that's interested in this type of news, and you're the outlet for writing that type of news. And I demand that it be factual. I demand that you are covering things that are what you say you're going to cover. You have that power on the small local level, as you are like what I'm getting to down below, the direct relationship. Is you can develop that direct relationship. You can email reporters and say, hey, I think it'd be great if you guys covered this type of thing. And that reporter is such a small level, it can be like, oh, that's really cool. Or like, I'm sorry, that's just like outside our coverage area. We don't have enough people. Or that's something that we'd really like to get to, and we will, but it might not be tomorrow. That type of relationship, right? Because reporters live in your community. They live there. I live in Tucson, right? I'm here. Just like all of our readers, and so that relationship is an opportunity to build a new kind of journalism. And then I know I'm touching on a lot of topics. I'm sorry if I'm talking really fast. I tend to get excited, but this thing here, the demand clarity from officials, this is one that I want you all to pay particular attention to. And I'm going to move. I think I have. This is the last minute one. Yes. Okay, great. This is what I'm talking about. This is the YouTube channel for the Tucson City Council. And this is phenomenal. Okay. I'm going to point out some shortcomings, but I want to also say this is absolutely amazing. And lots of cities and towns and counties across the country they do this. That you can watch your city council meeting from your house. And I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to remember where you couldn't do this. Where you had to go down to City Hall and sit there for 5 hours uh, to cover it. But now, like, look at this. You can watch this city council meeting. The Tucson City Council, they have closed captioning, right? You can read it, what they're saying. And then over on the right, it's a transcript. I have my browsers in Spanish, but that's a transcript. That is what they are saying. You can scroll through what they say, and that is phenomenal. And so I want to applaud them. I want to applaud all the local governments who are doing this. This is a tremendous public service. But I also want to like push them, with the tools that technology gives them, they're able to create that transcript. But that transcript, you can't like download it, right? You can't create like a document from it. You can copy and paste the whole thing, but it's got timestamps littered throughout it. And it's awkward, where they could have something that would just spit out a transcript. And wouldn't that be amazing? If you wanted to, you could just go like quickly scan. You could do Control F, right? Find. Were they talking about zoning? Boom, you can find it. Like you, the public, could do that. You could check in on your city council in minutes, and you'd be like, oh, that's what they said. Okay, cool, interesting, huh? All right. And if you do that, you can start building an archive. So as a member of the public, you could very, very easily be like, oh, so they were putting in that stop sign. They're talking about putting in that stop sign here in our neighborhood. They haven't done it. I know that it came up there. Why didn't they put it in, right? You could, with the archive of transcripts, you could quickly see like, oh, this is what they said about it. Or they said that like they didn't have enough money to do it, but then they also spent all this money on a stop sign on the other side of town or whatever. And you could see the conversation flowing through the weeks, months, or years, or whatever, how long it's been going on. That is all like that could be available to you. And I know I'm a kind of a nerd about all this, but like I think that there are a lot of people who would be very interested if this was a type of tool that was available to them, they would use it. But the real thing that I want to talk about for clarity is agendas. I don't know if any of you have ever taken the time to try to read an agenda for a public meeting, but often it is just the most atrocious, miserable experience of reading. It is not designed to be understood by the general public. And I want to, while I say that, I also want to applaud. We have local, city staff, county staff, all that, who work really hard to put together memos to like accompany agenda items, and I can see them trying to say like why you should care about this, how much money does it cost, that type of stuff. They think it's great, but really we're getting to the point where city governments, county governments, a lot of them, they could write these things so that a person in the general public could go say, hey, I want to know what the city council is doing. And they could pull up the agenda. It would be written in plain language. It would have links to the documents also written in plain language, so that the people, the city council works for the public, so the city council's bosses could just easily read what they're up to and why. And that's something that, for obvious reasons, right? Elected officials don't necessarily want to be as plain as possible about what they're doing and why. Not that there's necessarily anything nefarious, but also it's just kind of like sometimes they just don't know what they're doing. Sometimes they're conflicted and they don't want to actually like illustrate how conflicted they are. And things are just complicated. I've been using the example of zoning. That's super complicated. So it's hard to take a complicated thing and make it simple for the general public to understand. I get that. But that is something that as local newspapers recede, local governments, I believe, need to fill in. And that is very concerning because now you have elected officials giving the truth to the public. But what elected officials need to do is they need to make it as easy as possible for the general public to understand what they're doing. If you don't have reporters there, then the responsibility falls to the officials. Now, I would love to get to the point where if any member of the public were to go to a public meeting agenda, and if it wasn't easily understandable what they were doing, then we would raise the hue and cry that they are trying to hide something. as it is, it's just taken as a given that it's going to be impossible to read the meeting agenda. And I think that's tragic. And given the tools that we have and given the responsibility shift on the cities, on the elected officials, I think that we should push that. You should demand clarity from your officials. There's no excuse anymore. So, anyway, that's my little soapbox that I get on, and I'm working out how to articulate all that. But anyway, so that is my spiel, and been doing this for about like 35 minutes, something like that, or an hour, I guess. Sorry. I would love to answer questions from you. When I did it yesterday, somebody brought up something that I hadn't even thought of, and I'm very grateful for that. So please throw your questions at me. I can do this as long as you like.
Couple of quick questions, and I apologize if you've mentioned this and I didn't catch it. I'm curious what time of the day the agenda comes out. Like, is it out, in the old days, I actually helped my kids deliver papers. We had to have them out there by 5:30 a.m. So I'm curious about that. What time does everybody know it comes live? And then do they have like a trial period before they subscribe? And I'm curious what the subscription rates are, if you don't mind sharing that. And again, I apologize if you've already answered those.
Yeah, okay. So the first question is, it goes out at 6 o'clock in the morning, right? So we are it doesn't make a noise when it arrives in your inbox, but it's essentially the landing of the newspaper on your driveway at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so what's interesting about that is we're online, but most news outlets don't have that deadline, right? They post the thing whenever it's ready. So I appreciate the discipline of having to have this thing done, just like at the newspaper, of there is a moment where this thing has to be accurate, true, well written, done. Speak now, forever hold your peace. Boom, that has to be done. I appreciate that. I like the discipline of it, but I also am just very, very jealous of the reporters at other news outlets that just get to be okay, I'm going to tinker with this a little bit more. This is done. Ours there is a moment in time, just like with a traditional newspaper, 6 o'clock in the morning, Monday through Friday. And then in terms of our subscribers, right? So we are just under 4,000 subscribers, and we are 700 plus paid subscribers. So in our world of the newsletters, that's kind of phenomenal. I think the math works out to we have, I think it's 18% or 19%, give something like that, of our total subscribers are paid subscribers. Industry wide, if you have 5%, then you're doing well. We have 3 times that. And I think that's because we work really hard, but I also think it's because we live in a place where there are a lot of people who are committed to local journalism. There's a lot of local residents who value this and are yes, I am willing to pay for this. I want this thing to exist. I want local news. And what was the final one? The trial period. Yes, about the trial period.
Yeah, cost.
So what we do is you can read it for free forever if you want. There's no. It's only if you say okay, this is doing what I want it to do. Yeah, so I want it to stick around, so I'll help it stick around with my dollars. Then you can pay. And so we do. It's $120 a year, or it's about $10 a month. Wow. If you want to do it monthly. Was that all your questions?
Yes, it does. And then just a curious question. So you've got that 6 a.m. hard deadline, which personally I think that's bravo to you. Are you working though until 4 a.m.? When do you finally call it and say I'm done?
So no, I am not working till 4 o'clock in the morning. But it has been just a little behind the scenes is there are 2 of us, right, for the most part, who are putting out these newsletters. We do have the interns and contributors lately, and that is phenomenal. It's great. But for the bulk of our time, it's just been Kurt and Caitlin. It's so putting out that 5. This is original reporting that we're doing. This is news stories that like you would expect to see in a newspaper, that type of thing. Although a different tone a little bit. But that's a lot. Like that's a grind. And it's we take 2 weeks off around the holidays, like in December. Basically, like that's the rest of the year. It's 5 days a week that we're pumping out news. And so it's easy to like get behind schedule, right? So that we have to like discipline ourselves so that we are like we're trying to get done by like 5 or 6, that type of thing. But it definitely happens where we are working till like 8, 9, 10 o'clock. Particularly like when I'm out here harping about clear writing, right? I do that locally as well, and so I can't write something that is not up to my like personal standard of clarity, and that is hard work, and that takes time. And there are many evenings where I'm sitting here at 7 o'clock at night trying to like work out this phrasing, so that it's clear. And you get tired, your brain doesn't work as well, and you're trying to do this really creative work, and it can be difficult. But for the most part, Caitlin and I are both pretty disciplined people. And so for the most part, we are like getting done at, like 5, 6 o'clock, something like that. But one thing that I do is I often wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, where to like take that final look at the newsletter. And just more often than not, I find there's, like an extra period, or something wrong, something little tiny thing, so that's the stress of the journalism world is there are 10,000 little things that can go wrong in any piece of writing, and you stress about every single one of them. Yeah, it's basically like get it done. I'm working long days, so is Caitlin. Yeah, thankfully we are not working till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, in terms of fact checking, is there an opportunity in using AI for real-time fact checking for print or audio journalism?
I'm so glad you brought that up. I had that on my my presentation to talk about, but I kind of skipped right over it. Sorry, thank you. Yeah, so AI. So in terms of fact checking, one thing that I've seen that AI is really good at is you can transcribe simultaneously, right? What people are saying. If I were talking right now, there are programs that will transcribe it just as I talk. And then with AI, what you can do is you can ask it to like, write a story about this in the vein of whatever, right? Like as if it were for a local newspaper or something like that. And so the AI can go through all of that text and organize it the way that it's been taught newspaper stories are supposed to be written. And so it can organize everything that's been said for you so that you can go and fact check it. I do not know if there are programs out there, AI programs out there, that can like verify information that it has gathered from spoken words. But if it isn't there now, it will be tomorrow. That absolutely is going to be. I think you're spot on. You have your finger on the pulse. Like that is something that's going to come up, and that could be, as we talk about AI. If we're a little, fretting about it, like I think that's one of those things that's going to come out that people will be like, oh, that's fantastic. Problem with AI is that it only is taught how to do things, right? So it doesn't think for itself. So if it's been, this is hard for me to come up with an example, but basically like you still need a human mind, right? Who knows how to spot BS, like the AI it doesn't think that well. But that what you're getting at right there, fact checking, like in real time, AI is going to be a tremendous tool for that.
Thank you.
I wish I could point you to a tool. If I come across one, I'll try to circulate it around.
I might have missed it, but did you pursue the nonprofit route?
Yeah, so that's a very, very interesting question, right? So when we launched, we kind of just like decided that we were going to launch, that we were going to do this. Some people will have like, okay, so next year we're going to launch this thing, and they do all their planning beforehand and they launch, and it's like a set organization. we've had to just make decisions as we go. And doing the nonprofit is definitely one of those things that's out there. The advantages of the nonprofit are there are lots of people who want to donate money to local journalism, but they want to do it to, as a tax deductible donation, right? They can't do that for us because we're an LLC, right? So that's a definite cost to us. The problem, the disadvantage of the nonprofit and the advantage of the being for profit is that we have freedom. We're not being directed by anybody. We can make choices on the fly. We have, if we want to, we could sell this if we wanted to, right? Whereas a nonprofit, you really can't do that. If you're a nonprofit, you tend to be grant funded more than anything. And, there's a lot of grants out there that are absolutely phenomenal. Like we're using one for our part-time reporter, and it is a godsend. But when you are a nonprofit and you are depending so much on grants, you kind of most grants are, this grant is available to a news outlet who wants to cover X in Y way, right? And so if you get that grant, that now determines that you are going to cover X in Y way. You have to do that. That's the agreement that you got the grant. Whereas when we get, when subscribers support us, they see what we're doing and they're like, just keep doing that, keep going, keep expanding, we trust you to spend this money. And so we get to be like, okay, this is what we want to focus on. We do this, we want to, expand into this area. We can just make those choices and do that, where we would be more restricted if we were completely dependent upon grants. So there are definitely pluses and minuses to being a for-profit or a nonprofit. For us, I'm glad that we're for-profit, at least for the time being. It allows us to grow the way that we need to grow. And we also don't have to spend, there's two of us, so if one of us was dedicated to writing grants, then that would pull a lot of time and energy away from doing the reporting that our subscribers want us to do. But definitely the nonprofit status is it's always on our radar. And I don't know what's going to happen in the next several years, but who knows?
I really don't have a question, but 40 years of revelation from your last 2 days here. When I moved to Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, as a corporate PR fellow, we had 4 dailies, 2 in Raleigh, 2 in Durham. 15, 20 years later, when I had my own communications firm, a one-man band, I had one paper in each town. Mm-hmm. 15 years later than that, or 2010, the Raleigh paper bought the Durham paper and put the Raleigh's, basically the Durham's masthead on the Raleigh paper. Mm-hmm. And you'd be lucky if you found a page in the 12-pager or 16-pager of Durham news, local news. Mm-hmm. And now I'm living in a retirement community, and Duke University's School of Government has put out 9th Street Journal, which is exactly what you're talking about. They have students writing 4 or 5 stories each week. It's a color newsletter, and I have yet to be asked to pay for it.
Is it the 9th Street? Is that what you said?
9th Street Journal.
Okay, cool. Thank you. The story that you're describing has played out countless times across the entire country. It's 100% typical of the last 15, 20 years. And when I grew up in Fort Wayne, that was the Journal Gazette in the morning and News Sentinel in the afternoon, and I think they're kind of still around. But here in Tucson, we used to have the Tucson Citizen and the Arizona Daily Star. Tucson Citizen folded in 2009, 2008, and that's a huge hit. But yeah, it's hard to overstate how bad the situation is. I try to keep things optimistic and point towards the future, what we can do, But it is an absolute tragedy. There are so many people in the country who do not have access to what the heck is going on in their community. It's boggles my mind.
Piggyback onto that question. Sir, I live down the road from you in Burlington, North Carolina, and our newspaper now is printed in Fayetteville, 3 hours away. So we have very little local news. And what I wanted to say to you, Kurt, is thank you for showing us in our backyard that there's a Cleveland agenda and there's a Pittsburgh. I'm curious, I'm seeing you as a person who is kind of at the forefront and pushing this and maybe inspiring other locales to do this. I know I'm taking this back home. We have crazy politics with commissioners and school board and stuff like that. And the news is coming out by Facebook. I'm curious what percent maybe of the country, and I'm sure it's pretty much metropolis type stuff, but is the word going through like in your professional organizations and things like that? Like this is where we need to go to give the people information.
Okay. So one thing I would like to point out to you and to everybody, if you're looking for these types of local outlets, there's an organization called LION, like the animal. It's an acronym for Local Independent Online News. And they have a directory, a nationwide directory of these types of outlets. And you can go there and you can look up your area and you can find, I should have put that in my presentation, but you can find that. You can find these types of outlets in your area. And then with regard to the question of like, in the industry, what is the conversation about, like, this is where we need to go? So a couple things. One is the news industry is kind of by design a chaotic, infighting, just mess of organizations, right? The idea is that you have independent outlets all kind of like looking at the same thing, writing stories about it or newscasts about it, whatever, and that the public can have all these different sources and be able to see, oh, like, so that they all are saying like this thing. So yeah, so that's true. Okay, cool. And then this little take, oh, that's interesting. You know, you want to have this just kind of like all that. So when it comes to like as an industry where we should head, you're going to have 1,000 different ideas. But I do think that the local online that has staying power. I think that there's going to be a lot of pretty broad consensus that model is at least promising and that has been successful many times. But how to go about it is tricky. We have the model of a newsletter. So that means that we have a product that we make every day. We have people who have bought in, have said, I'm subscribing to this thing. I'm by choice. I want this thing, you know. And so we have that reader buy-in. We have a community building, that type of thing. But then there are also nonprofits who are more like, okay, what we're doing is more trying to write news for people like communities of color, for example. Who are like either completely left out of traditional news or always talked about but never heard from, you know, and that's a very legitimate thing to do. That's fantastic. But that's also not like general circulation, general public thing, right? That's for like a more specific audience of like people, like-minded individuals. People are interested in that. And so there's all these different models out there, which is really exciting. And I think is fantastic because time will tell which ones are the most successful. And so it's just experimentation, just trying to find new things. We're all doing the same thing. We're all trying to inform the public so that when they make decisions about who they elect or how they pressure officials or whatever, they're doing it based on accurate information. That's the goal, right? That's the goal shared by so many of these outlets and these reporters. A big thing that I would point out is the newspapers are still around. And a lot of them are doing really good work. There's a lot of good reporters in there, right? I don't want to disparage them in that way. But they suck up so much money from advertisers and subscribers. people who care about local news, even if they're not really getting it from the paper, they still hold on to that paid subscription, like that print subscription to fund the newspaper, and the advertisers see that. So like, oh, this is my best, venue in town, that there's all these subscribers, and there's just millions and millions and millions of dollars flowing through that. But if you look at it as from the perspective of how much is this organization informing the public about what their local officials are doing, you might end up, in a town where there's $10 million flowing to this organization, and they kind of periodically write about local government, like that happens a lot. Then you have all these other organizations, that are small and fast and nimble and dedicated to covering local government. They don't have access to those millions. Those millions flow the other way. And so that's a big challenge for everybody. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling, but yeah, I think that local online there's a broad consensus building that this is like the future. This is where we need to go.
Okay. Well, Kurt, thank you very much for today and yesterday, and it's been very enlightening. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed having to distill my thoughts to present them to you, however well I did that. But this has been a pleasure, and I want to thank all of you for having an interest in this topic, because that's the most important thing. So thanks a lot.